Hello, David Zritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. You're probably seeing a face that truly needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway, just out of protocol. David Arnold, welcome to the show.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's a pleasure. How have you been doing? I feel like it's a cliched question to say in this environment that we're in, but you're doing well, it seems.
Well, I think if you think about the life of a composer doing this kind of job, then it's not that different. We spend most of our day sort of locked in a dark room by ourselves anyway. So, um, it seems like this is the perfect storm because it's like, oh, this is just exactly the same as the day before or the day before. And oddly, the Groundhog Day aspect of it, which people don't often get a feel of, but I've really felt it this time, is that when you're doing a movie and you might have 100 minutes of music to write, and you're going to be in that room for 8 weeks, 7 days a week, and you've just got a huge list of cue titles that you need to tick off. You need to get through so much a day, and every day it's like you get to the end of the day and you think, I got 2 minutes, and then you think, well, tomorrow I'll do another two, and it's that constant climb, and so it feels kind of similar to that in a way. So, but the thing that I've liked about it is just on a personal perspective, it's the lack of deadlines. Like no one is saying we need something by tomorrow, which so often is the way. So I'm having I'm not saying I'm having a great time, but it's odd, and one can't help but think everyone is in less fortunate circumstances. So but for me, it's not been that different. But I realise that that's a very privileged position to be in. There's a lot of things that I don't have to worry about that a lot of people do have to worry about. So anyway, lucky me, and just sending, you just keep, because we've all got family, and it's like, you think about what, keep thinking about what they're doing and how they're getting on, and because you can't see them, so it's all very odd. It's odd in that respect, but on a sort of day by day basis, the process of being locked away somewhere for a long time is very familiar.
That's good. You found a silver lining in this, or a familiarity, at least to it,
Yeah,
which
I
is
mean,
good.
a lot of people do. I think artists and writers, they've all sort of been saying the same thing. That this is kind of what we're used to.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned the word family. So I've got to start because one of the reasons when I was talking to David Williams, mutual friend, the reason I wanted him a part of this was because he was a fan. He is a fan. In
Yeah,
fact, he would claim himself to be a fan first and foremost. And every discussion, every article I've seen with you, every interview, you started to say that Bond was a part of your childhood and your fandom. But where
yeah.
did it begin? I mean, how did it all start? That passion?
Um, well, I think the Bond phenomenon is a very peculiarly British thing for people of a certain age. It was pre films on demand, pre I want it, I get it the next day. The a Bond movie was an event. It still is an event. So extraordinary to think that it's still an event. Almost 60 years after the first one, it's still front page news. And But in those days, in the 60s and the 70s, a Bond movie would be along every couple of years, and there would only be one or two films of that sort of caliber and size and spectacle in the rest of the calendar year. So when they said the cinematic event of the year, it really meant something. I mean, now we're told that every weekend. In fact, there are two or three cinematic events of the year every week. Well, it used to be. I'm sure we'll be back there before too long. But then it really was, and you would see it at the cinema, and then you'd have to wait years for it to come on the TV, 3 or 4, 5 years.
Hmm.
And when they came on the TV, they were always a part of a big kind of familial gathering. It's like it would be on at Christmas, it'd be the Boxing Day on Christmas Day Bond movie, or Christmas Eve Bond movie, and the Easter holiday. It's like it would only be once or twice a year, and it was a huge deal to watch these things on the TV, having heard about the magnificence of them, in earlier years, and just because you couldn't see it because you were too young. But my personal exposure to it was it's quite a well-told tale, but I'll do it again quickly. I was about 8 years old, and there was this Royal British Legion Club in Luton, where I was born and brought up. And my dad used to sing there, and we used to go there on Sundays, and they organised a kids' Christmas party. And it was all the usual stuff, and sandwiches and jelly and cake. And then they rolled out an old 16mm projector and a single mono speaker that sat underneath a portable screen that was wheeled in as well. Now all these kids are 6, 7, 8. They thought we were going to see Mickey Mouse or something. And to turn the lights off, this thing rattled into life. You know, I'm sitting next to it, so there's this kind of mechanical 16mm projector whirring and clanking. And then the beam of light sort of spits out, and it's the logo. And then it's the gun barrel. And I thought, what is this? And then, you know, Sean Connery being, you know, post-coitally machine gunned to death, and the giant, you know, the spaceship eating the little spaceship, and the guy, the spaceman, getting his air supply cut off and floating out into space, and then the music, you know. So within that 5 minutes, you had the gun barrel, you had the, you know, John's sort of space march, Capsule in Space Queue, then into that song. And that incredible song, that incredible sound of those violins, and the visuals, and you're in, you know, then you're in Japan, and you know, when you come from Luton, like, everything seems exotic, but that was like super exotic, and you forget that people didn't see much of the world then, you know. So Bond films kind of showed them the world, and it was sort of so over the top, but so brilliant. And I just remember thinking it was the effect of the whole thing that really got to me. The combination of all of those things, but especially the music, because you could almost shut your eyes and feel the same. You know, it grabbed you and kept you there the whole time. And whatever was going on the screen, you sort of had the sense that the music was telling you. And I wanted to, you know, I always felt like I wanted to be a part of the thing that made that noise, that made me feel like that. From that point on, it was like, you know, you just want all the Bond stuff. You know, I had the toys, I had the posters, the magazines, and then more appreciative, you know, as I got a bit older, of the soundtracks. And I've always loved it. I mean, I've always loved it. And I think there's some films, you know, I mean, I have my theories about all of them, same as anyone has, but I always sort of approached it the way that I watched it. You know, I wanted to, how would I want to feel when I see this moment? So when I got asked to do the first one, you know, you keep thinking a little bit back to, you know, being 8 and seeing Sean being machine gunned to death, and thinking like, oh yeah, now it's my turn to, you know, be a part of that thing. So it really is an extraordinarily, you know, enormous privilege and honour to have been associated with it, and still is. You know, I'm still doing things with them, and it's, you know, they treat you so extraordinarily well. So yeah, it's a lovely, lovely experience, and I've never been tired of that. You know, the headline thing. You know, whenever you're spoken about or written about, it's always, you know, Bond composer. Some people think that you might get fed up with that, but I'm thinking that's a lot. You know, just to get to that point.
You're literally, well, that's what I love about your story. I mean, well, I think all Bond fans have two things. They can actually recount the impact moment when they first encountered Bond, and it means something very nostalgic, very important to them. But to your point, I think what's great is they can take the movie music, the score, the soundtrack, and they can almost paint by numbers the visuals in their head when they truly appreciate that. But you took that and you felt some sort of compelling to do your own version of that. So Shaken and Stirred, I mean, that was a passion project.
Well, also, it was a lot of fun. I mean, I'd wanted to make a record for a long time, and for a long time I couldn't, because who was I? You know, I mean, I hadn't really done anything. And it wasn't until the film The Young Americans came out, and then I did a record with Björk called Play Dead. It wasn't until those two things happened, and then I subsequently got Stargate, and Stargate came out, and it was a big success, and people were very nice about the music. So at that point, you know, it's much easier to make a phone call to someone and say, I really want to do this. Do you want to do it with me, to someone famous? having done that than being the person I was maybe 3 years previously. Same person, same ideas, but no track record. So all of a sudden, people answered the phone, and I really wanted to make a record because I love songs. I think songs are the finest of art, of all art forms. And I apologise to any poets and novelists and filmmakers and playwrights and theatre critics and is that an art? Sculptors, and I just think it's the most immediate and the most impactful art form that there is. I think it's the most profound and it's the most accessible. And what you say about music, I mean, is true. And I think it's true because music stimulates every part of your brain. It's the only thing that does it. I've had MRI scans where we've sort of looked at all this stuff about how your brain works with music. And when you listen to music, all of your brain is alight with response, every part of it. And I think it's about the only thing that does it. I think that people's Bond experiences are formed the first time they see one. The first one is generally the one. And it's the first one in the cinema is obviously the ideal. And you're usually doing that when you're quite young. And the experience of, I remember saying, John used to say about, when he went in his dad's cinema, John Barry, and watched, Mickey Mouse and an enormous, dark theatre with these images flickering and people transfixed by it. The impact that has, and something about trying to chase and recreate that feeling, isn't it? It is almost drug-like, in as much that why do we keep coming back to Bond? Why do we keep coming back? And I think we keep coming back because everyone has their favourites, and potentially the next film that comes out could be the greatest James Bond film for me that's ever been made. It could all, the next one could be, and then when you're sitting there watching it, and you get the logo come up at the front and the gun barrel, if it's at the front, it comes up. For that moment, you might be about to watch the greatest James Bond film ever, better than your favourite.
Yeah.
And if it is, great. And if it isn't, best thing in the world, right at the end, James Bond will return, and you come back and you have another go. It's wanting to, and then you're so appreciative when the films touch on things that in a way remind you of your favourites. When there's moments that make you think, oh, that reminds me of Sean in that scene, or Roger in that scene. There's stuff which makes me go, oh yeah, this is what it's all about. It's not about you, the actor, as that character. It's not about me, the composer, doing that music. It's somehow about the character of James Bond, which kind of, it's a huge umbrella that we all, sort of shelter under and recognise that it's there. And when you get those moments when you think, oh God, yeah, that is classic Bond stuff. I always feel pathetically grateful, that it's still on the screen, that people still know how to do it, can still put this guy in a situation and make you go, I don't know how he's going to do it, but I want to watch and find out how he does it. That's what's so brilliant about it.
I've described Bond films like this. Bond films to me are like pizza and sex. Even when it's bad, it's still pretty good, actually.
No, not at the same time. I don't know.
Oh, why set limits?
probably something Roger would have done.
Exactly. All right. So you do this. Now you have to clear something up for me, because I have a friends of mine that are huge fans of yours. Not that I'm not, but there's a gentleman named, ready for this, John Williams, not the composer, who actually does a podcast, James Bond Radio. And he said, make sure you ask David about the real story of how he got Tomorrow Never Dies, about a certain record store and Barbara Broccoli.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've heard several stories where people say it was John Barry recommended me, and other bits and pieces. And I mean, I'd never spoken to John about it, and I'm not sure that he's the sort of person who necessarily would. I don't know. I mean, I got to know him very well, and it was so lovely to be able to just talk to him normally. But I never spoke to him about music. I would have been that guy otherwise. I would have been that guy asking him everything about everything, you know, and it would have been so annoying. So I just felt like I never could, so I didn't. We talked about a lot of other things, but I met John. George Martin introduced me to John Barry. John was mixing something at Air Studios. George was the, you know, sort of chairman and sort of figurehead. It was all his idea, and I was recording there, and he knew that I was a big Bond fan. And this is when I was doing Shaken and Stirred, and I think I'd completed 3 or 4 songs. And the first 3 that I did, Diamonds Are Forever, You Only Live Twice with Björk, and partly finished on Her Majesty's Secret Service with the propeller heads, but they weren't finished. And he said, "Listen, George, I won't do the voice." You know, George said, "Would you like to meet John Barry?" And I go, "Yes, I would like to meet John Barry, please." Anyway, so he brings me into the room, and John's there, and you know, we say hello, and and George says, "David's been making some covers of your songs. You know, would you want to listen to them?" And John said, "Yeah, I'd love to." So, you know, we had a DAT there, which was a digital tape for those who don't remember them, and stuck it in the machine. He played in those 3, and he really liked it. You know, he was very, very kind about it, which was obviously a huge relief. And I thought the story of me getting it was, you know, I then went off. We did Independence Day, which was a, you know, big movie. They knew at MGM that I liked Bond. When I was doing Stargate, the head of music invited me into his office to show me the teaser trailer for Goldeneye. So it was the first time that they just finished it, and it was before it went into theatres. Obviously, this is pre the internet, so, you know, you'd see it in the theatre or TV advertising. But principally, it was a theatrical teaser. And there's one where, you know, like Pierce comes on with Shadow at the end, and the numbers come, and he shoots them, and spin around, and it's 007. He walks right up to the camera, and he goes, "Were you expecting someone else?" You know,
Yeah.
Brilliant. You know, you're sort of cheering and jumping up and down, and thinking he's back. It's brilliant. And I was just finished Stargate, and it had gone very well, and I was just thinking, like, please ask me to do it. Anyway, they said that they'd already got, you know, Eric was on it, and they were quite a long way down the line. And I said, "Look, I'm a massive Bond fan, I'm a massive John Barry fan. If at any point John can't do it or won't do it, just keep me in mind, you know, because, you know, I'd always want John to do everything." Anyway, that was that. So I went on, did the record went well, did Independence Day, which did very well, got a Grammy for that. All of a sudden, I suppose I was a guy who was used to working with big movies, knew how to work with orchestras under those kind of time pressures, and, you know, just the pressure of working on a big film, and had this record. And so they liked the sound of the record. I'd sent them a couple of tracks because I was very aware that they're protective of the brand, and what I didn't want to do was release something and all of a sudden get a letter saying, "Can you cease and desist doing something or other?" So I made sure that they had copies of the artwork, so I wasn't stepping on anyone's toes. There was no copyright stuff, you know, just so I wouldn't upset anyone. And anyway, so they had a couple of tracks, and they put in on Her Majesty's Secret Service as a temp track for the BMW remote control BMW scene in the car park, with Pierce in the back seat and the phone, you know, driving the BMW, and they liked the way that was sitting. Barbara told me that she was in a record shop. I think it was either R Price or HMV. I think it was the only 2 that were still around at the time, and she was getting some soundtrack CDs. To find a composer, you know, as you would, you know, it's due diligence. You'd find out what's out there and who's doing what. So she was buying them, takes them to the front desk, and the cashier says, "You know, you're buying a lot of CDs." She goes, "Yeah, I'm working on the Bond thing." He said, "You should listen to this," and he gave her one of my soundtracks. And she went back, listened to it, and then I think about a week later, I got a phone call. Would I come in and talk to her about it? So she told me that story. I mean, I've got no reason to disbelieve her. So
That is phenomenal.
So I don't know who that person was, but I've always said, like, when I do concerts, I said I owe them either a very large drink or a very small house, one or the other. I
So
think it
for,
was I think it was a combination of, like Independence Day doing so well, and the music was doing
yeah.
well, and the record was fine, and they knew how much I loved it, and was sort of committed to it. So I'd like to think it was all those nice things. But John liking it wouldn't have hurt.
The one thing I noticed as a huge fan of the soundtrack of Tomorrow Never Dies is that you decided to bring back the James Bond theme in some casual moments, not just the bigger moments. I mean, you definitely had them there in the bigger moments, but even that kind of sneaky, swanky Bond, James Bond theme that we knew Sean Connery
Yeah,
to do. So how much
yeah.
did you consciously take a look at GoldenEye and go, okay, that's that soundtrack. Now I'm going to do this and maybe pour everything into it.
Uh, well, it wasn't my reaction to it. I mean, I thought when I saw GoldenEye, like watched the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes of GoldenEye, and I thought this might be one of the most incredibly creative reinventions of something I've ever heard. Once they started playing the theme on the Timps, I thought this is it. I'm never going to get this gig. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant. And loved the film, loved to see him back, loved Pierce being so great in it. And loads of sort of classic great stuff. Martin Campbell, an absolute ball of energy. And if there's one thing you can tell from his films, from both Casino Royale and GoldenEye, is that just the sheer amount of energy that man has. He's incredible. He's like a ball of Duracells, and he never stops. He's so energetic, and that's infectious. That enthusiasm and that energy is really infectious. And I thought GoldenEye was like full of great energy. But the music department, I think, were more keen to have more Bond theme in. I think they felt that maybe GoldenEye could have had more and didn't, and so maybe let's put a bit more in this time. So I was encouraged, let's say, to put sort of more Bond theme in. Maybe it was just a way of saying, it's still here, it's still that guy. Or maybe they just liked it. But I didn't have a problem with it because obviously, it's a brilliant piece of music. But in a way, finding its way into Bond's world is, it's a great way of kind of keeping the character first and foremost, and knowing that it's still the same person, despite what he's doing, if he's fighting or spying or creeping around or doing things that he does. There's never I don't think there'd ever be a point where playing the Bond theme when Bond's on the screen won't work if you do it properly. I don't think so. Yeah. Now, do you know what I kept saying? What do I think? Would it have worked in Honor Majesties with him and Tracy in the car at the end? You probably could have made it work.
Well, it does almost crash at the
Vesper?
very end. It crashes
Yeah, I
up.
mean,
So
like with Vesper, would have worked with Vesper? When he went right at the end of that movie when he's trying to resuscitate her in Venice, would that have worked? I think the more I think about it, the more I think, well, I think it would have done, but then it would have been very much about him. And
right.
Now I'm thinking of ways of this, the way it changes your perspective on character. But I think I wanted to come into it with. And I said at the time, someone pointed me towards an old interview I did in 1997 when the film came out. And I said then that I wanted to sort of feel like I had one foot in the 60s and one in the 90s, to sort of keep the sense of it, the sort of DNA of it and the feel of it, but bring it up to date. But I do remember the point when I got asked to do it, felt sort of profound in a small way, because, when you're a composer, sort of big things generally don't happen. You don't get gold-plated Rolls Royces sent to pick you up to take you places. You get asked to do something, and when you've done it, they usually say thanks very much, and that's the end of it. What happens to the film afterwards? I've got nothing to do with that. So you don't participate in the same way that you don't do the publicity tours. You generally don't get asked about it when they talk about the film, and which is fine. If I wanted to do that, I'd be doing a different job. But I'm trying to remember why I started saying all that.
Well, I'll tell you the one thing that stands out to me in that is, and I'm sure you know this, so it's going to set up probably a humble moment, but one of the reasons why you're currently, absolutely one of the fan favorites as far as composer is you do a wonderful job with homages, to, for example, like John Barry. I do have a question from a gentleman named Warren Ringham, who actually has a James Bond tribute band.
He does indeed.
Yeah, Cue the Music Show.
I
You
do.
know of it?
I have, yeah. I've met Warren. I sat next to him. There was a talk somewhere in London, a cafe in London, and he was just sitting next to me. He gave his card, and he's a trumpet player, and he said he had all arrangements of Bond stuff, and I've sort of subsequently, seen the band, not live, but obviously on the, on YouTube and everything. And I mean, they do a phenomenal job of making that stuff work, and what I loved about Warren was that, he was as enthusiastic about the music as anyone, that I've met that's enthusiastic about him. And you can tell, it's that thing about the energy being there, it's like he's got the ear for it, and more importantly, I think he understands what makes it work. There's a thing about it which I think you've got to get, and and the fact that he does Bond music shows that aren't all songs. He'll do cues from films and everything. That obviously that's quite a niche appeal. I mean, it's quite a big niche with Bond, but when people go to those shows, they don't expect to hear Backseat Driver or some of the cues from One of Majesty's. So it's brilliant to see that happening.
That's great.
And
that you know that.
the enduring appeal of the music. The brilliance of John, principally, I think John Barry. Obviously, there's lots of other great work that that every other composer has done. But I always go back to my anchor in all this is John's music.
So he had a question of that very thing. So this is perfect send up. Warren says you've been very proactive in using homage and quotes of Barry in your scores, and it dedicated a whole album to reimagining some of his work, which we just talked about. Is there any cue or motif left that you have a burning desire to work on in any project anytime soon?
Well, I think most of those appeared in Tomorrow Never Dies in a way, and it was probably more about that that I loved them. It was just the From Russia with Love, sort of brass that and a couple of little ideas, little instrumentation ideas. But since then, there hasn't really. I don't think I've really done that. I think I've quoted the John score because it always felt a bit odd when you start drawing the shape of a new film to hark back in that way to other films. Someone Never Dies, pure enthusiasm and love of it. And also, it felt like as a fan to hear that again, in a movie, and you hear it when he punches someone in the face after a great one line. Filthy Habit. It's so great. Yeah, one of the things that I'm always asked about and asked whether I would consider doing it again is the 007 thing, John Barry's 007 thing. And I've thought about that. Out of all of them, it's the only one that I've really thought about, could this work? And every time I tried it, it sort of didn't. And I think there's something about when it gets to the main, the main body of it, the expression of the theme, it's major, so it feels happy, for want of a better word. And it always feels like whenever that plays, that Bond is going to win. And increasingly, as the Bond films that I worked on moved on, it became increasingly more dramatic in a personal way. And the idea of him failing became a feature. Probably the first really big one was actually the start of Die Another Day, when he'd been captured and tortured and kept for a long time. That's not something that happens to Bond. He doesn't get captured and he doesn't stay captured for long, but he was. And then obviously, with Daniel's reading and his movies, it's a complete unraveling of that aspect of it. We really get into the sort of personal damage and the history of it. So that tune never felt like it could play with where we were with the character at that point. you know, maybe if Daniel would ever had a hover gondola, you know, it would have been different. But you know, his films aren't those films; they're
Right.
their own pieces. That's not saying that you couldn't ever do it in the future. But having said that, if you think about, you know, the cinema going audience, a lot of them, apart from your Bond fans, won't even know what that music is. You know, I mean, I know it's a nod to the people that do love it, but it's odd that I'm finding people now that have never seen a Sean Connery or a Roger Moore Bond film. You know, I've met people who now have not heard of the Beatles. That's happening. You know,
Yeah.
who don't know who Ella Fitzgerald is, who don't know a single song by Cole Porter. You know, that's where we are now. You know, it's like these things, you have to be told about them to know about them. They're not going to be offered to you anymore. So keeping that stuff alive, you know, is another thing that I think we should be very wary of. But that's a different show.
Well, it's interesting. There's a podcaster out there named Joe Darlington, being James Bond, and he observed that you were really good, but it changed, of breaking the fourth wall of music. And what he meant by that, he gave a perfect example. The the caviar factory scene in The World Is Not Enough. He said,
Yeah.
without the music, it plays as a very violent, serious, piece. But you add the music, it's almost like a wink and a nod, like it's playful and it's fun. And
Yeah.
he noticed that you do an amazing job breaking that fourth wall, so to speak.
Well, I think you've got to look at the scenes that you're working with, you know, and what makes that scene support that approach was basically Pierce Brosnan and cutaways of Robbie Coltrane, you know, because, you know, Pierce looks incredulously as his car gets sliced in two. You know, it doesn't feel like it's genuinely dangerous to him. You know, it's you know, there is comedy at work, and obviously, you know, Robbie Coltrane, brilliant comedic actor anyway, and the fact that he ends up jumping in a pond of his own caviar, you know, it's not exactly hanging by a cheese wire from a bridge, you know. So you know, I think you have to look at how these films and these scenes can shoulder certain you know, dramatic approaches, because in that same film, you know, all the stuff with Electra was played really deadly seriously, you know,
Hmm.
and I think that's one of the great things about Bonds. You know, it's like you can have these moments that you can enjoy, really enjoy. You know, the Caviar Factory is sort of so mad, it's just enjoyable, you know, because it's kind of chaotic and crazy. And the stuff with Electra is, you know, I suppose much darker and much more serious. You know, we have to believe that he genuinely felt for her, and that she genuinely got you know, got under his skin and had fooled him. And it's like, if you fool James Bond, that's a, you know, that's a big deal in a Bond movie, and that made her all the more, I think, dangerous and effective. Um, you know, the moments when they were with each other, and you know, that's where Electra's theme came from. You know, that we had to make her kind of vulnerable, but she was also poisonous. You know, but he doesn't know that, and the
Hmm.
music doesn't. The music tells her, because we can't get ahead of Bond. You know, we can't know that she's bad, otherwise he looks like an idiot. Because if he doesn't know and we do know, then we're shouting at the screen, going like, you know, like behind you almost, and it devalues him. So he doesn't know until we know that she's bad. You know, when she turns on M you know, the pipeline situation with the bomb in the pipeline, and she turns on M, and then she reveals herself, and then, you know, so that's when we know, and Bond finds out pretty soon as well. Because if we'd have got ahead of it, then, you know, I think you devalue. And that note actually is a Michael Apted note, the director. You know, his key thing was, let's not tell anyone the stuff that Bond doesn't know, because if
Mm.
we know it, he doesn't, then we're in trouble. It weakens him. Um, so, you know, you had, you know, those great moments in World Is Not Enough. You know, the Thames chase at the start, which was funny and exciting, and I thought it was brilliant. And the stuff with Electra, which was genuine, and then you had the Caviar Factory, which was fun. You know, but it can handle all that. You know, he can handle it. He can. That film shouldered those sequences, and you never thought this is silly for silly's sake. You know,
Hmm.
it felt like it was partnered by something darker as well. So Yes, I think that was a question. I might have answered a question you never asked, but
No, I love it. I love it. You're telling the journey around it. The total layman
I'm trying to
question.
remember. It's odd because I haven't thought about it really. I mean, I don't think. I mean, I don't do these things and then think about them for years afterwards. You kind of do them and then you do something else. You know, and it's only when you get asked in situations like this, and by people who know and appreciate the minutiae of it, I suppose, and presumably your audience is interested in that as well. I mean, I would be that audience as well, so I'd want to know. Is that I start thinking about it, and I start thinking about it, and I start remembering all the things that I thought about when I was doing it and why I was doing it. And I think that's one of the key things in a film composer's job is to know the reasons why you're doing it, because someone's going to ask you at some point. Someone's going to ask you, why is that music like that?
Mhm.
And it can't just be because I like it. It can't be that. You're serving a story, and the story is long and complex and intricate, and it's funny and it's dangerous and it's sad and it's exciting and it's thrilling and all those things. And music has to be all those things and tie it all together and make sense of it. So you have to know why you're making the noise that you're making, and you are choosing to say the things that you're saying. So those machinations happen all the time.
Yeah.
And once you know what that is, that's when you start writing the scene. But then, like I said, before we were talking about lockdown, then you wake up the next morning, you've got to do the next one. So, you kind of like an actor learning his lines, like, I was told, I can't remember, it might be Michael Sheen, talking about a partly, it's like so many lines. It was Benedict on Sherlock, like so many lines, so many words he has to learn. And then the next day he's got to learn more words. And I said to him on set one day, I said, like, hey, what do you do? He says, what I did yesterday, I can't remember. I can't remember what I said yesterday. I'm just learning. Today, my brain has got that amount of storage and it's full up of what I'm doing today. And then at the end of that day, it all gets emptied and I fill it up with tomorrow's work. So it just goes, but then, it never really properly goes because, your brain's an amazing thing. So it's all in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So like now, I'm sort of recalling why I did the things I did and why, anyway.
No, I'm glad we're
How much
conjuring the
Royale you
minutia
got?
because, well, I listen. We got reels and reels, but the minutia is the nectar of the gods for the Bond community because they love that little detail. They love to get into, what was really the impetus behind those things. Like I think about Casino Royale. What an amazing, amazing soundtrack. Vesper being one of my favorite themes out of the entire franchise. And I mean, kind of a layman's question, but when you're doing Casino Royale, do things like, oh, it might be a reboot, or do you get a finished film, or do you just get a script? But what is that process that runs through your head to create something that memorable?
Well, it was really interesting because for the first time, that was my fourth film, but the first time when I didn't know who was going to be playing James Bond. So I had the script before we knew who was cast. I was doing music for the screen tests. So everyone who came into read for Bond was directed by Martin Campbell. They built a set and the actors came on and they did, I think, 2 or 3 scenes. There was about 4 or 5 people who were up for it. And I did some music for it. I mean, it was as much a real deal film thing as possible. Shot it in 35mm, lit it. It was all, costume. Everything was done like it was a proper movie. And that's the only way you can really tell. And that everyone always does the scene from Russia with Love. That's the obligatory audition scene that you have to do alongside a kind of actiony, fighty one, and usually something else. So these actors all did it. I remember Henry Cavill was really good, and Daniel were the ones that were kind of coming closer to the finish line. And but I didn't know who was going to be Bond, so I could read the character as James Bond and not as Pierce's James Bond, because once you get familiar, when you watch an actor as a composer on the screen doing things, you become incredibly intimately aware of what they do. Every eye movement, every twitch, everything will say something. about a character or the situation that they're in, and my job is to respond to it and to interpret that and to see whether that's something that needs to be underlined or handheld or ignored. You know, it's like it's all part of the storytelling. It's quite complicated. So I didn't have that. You know, I couldn't imagine the lines in Casino Royale spoken by Pierce, obviously, because he wasn't going to be doing it. So I didn't know who it was. So you have to, you know, really what you have is the raw character on the page, and that script was phenomenal. And I remember reading it and thinking, I mean, the action stuff obviously was huge, but the sort of character things, the hymn stuff, especially the beginning. You know, I know where you keep your gun. You know, that was just so cold and so brilliant. And I remember thinking, this is great. This is going to be great. Then they cast Daniel, and so then I could, you know, could I imagine Daniel? Not really. I didn't, you know, because I didn't know what he was going to do. You know, you don't know, and no one did. And what was astonishing was the you know, the kind of press reaction to it. You know, the blonde Bond thing, and it's like, by the time that was happening, I'd seen some stuff that he was doing, and I was thinking, like, these people are going to look really stupid in about 8 months' time. They're going to look really stupid. So, you know, I think everyone was quite happy just to keep stum, you know, just not say, okay, people are going to say stuff anyway. The best thing you could do is turn up with something which makes them look stupid, which they did. And so, I mean, I always like to start with a song. Always feels like, you know, this is John's thing, right? I mean, I know it started with From Russia with Love, and John didn't write that. The brilliant arrangement of it. And obviously, you know, that film is filled with, you know, amazing John Barry music. And I think he was very courteous in the way that he included the song so much, you know. And but then obviously with Goldfinger onwards, everything changed. And I love the idea of that song, you know, almost like being like a shop window, isn't it, in a way? You know, it's like you walk past, you know, the Harrods Christmas display, and you go like, wow, I want to go in and I want to see what's going on in there. And that's what the song does. It should say, this is the world that you're about to enter into. This is the world of Casino Royale, or blah, blah, blah. But it wasn't until I actually saw Daniel kind of moving that I sort of got the sense of what that song should be. And also what it should be about, because, you know, there's a couple of things at work here. One is, what should it be? What should the vibe of the song be? And that you have to take completely from Daniel's portrayal of it, because this was like Bond's movie. The first time, I say for a long time, that it was like Bond's movie. You know, like a lot of the time you could say that Goldfinger was about, you know, Goldfinger more than James Bond, for instance. But this felt like it was him. You know, it was him, and obviously it had to be, because you're effectively taking him back to the start. And I'd seen the roughs of that African chase at the start of that movie, and I think when I saw it first, it was around 13 or 14 minutes long. It might have, first time was 17 minutes. That footage, I think it got down to 9.5 in the final edit, but I saw it when it was that long. And I've watched Daniel run through a wall, you know, like a plasterboard wall, unironically, and then recover and carry on, you know. And I thought, that's, in a way, that's the guy.
Yeah.
You know, we need a song that's going to be able to run through a wall, and a singer who's going to be able to sound like the sort of guy that can run through a wall, as well as comfort Vesper, you know, in that sort of desperate, dark moment. And I wasn't sure who that could be. You know, we talked about the idea of masculinity in, you know, Daniel, very alpha male Bond, you know, at that point, not, you know, an unreconstructed person. M still calls him, you know, blunt instrument. So there's less sophistication with this person at this point. And that's what we need at the start of the film. You know, you need to think, kept thinking like a young Mike Tyson. It's like he's kind of ready to take on anything, and so I wanted it to be aggressive and masculine. And thinking about like in the 70s, you had a lot of masculine singers. I say masculine, even though they might have had different sort of voices. The idea of them, even if it was like Bruce Springsteen or Robert Plant or even like Rod Stewart in the Faces, and some of them are a bit camp, but they were definitely masculine. Or Bon Scott from AC/DC, or Paul Rodgers, like sort of hard voices, like rough masculine voices, and you think like, well, we don't really have any of them anymore. There isn't really anyone who sings like that too much, and there's a lot of gentle voices. There's a lot of the singer-songwriter thing. There's a lot of intimate, gentle, artistic voices, singer-songwriter voices, which aren't that person. So who do we find for that? And we were talking to the head of music at Sony then, and Leah Volek, her name, and she was talking about Chris Cornell. And I knew Soundgarden. I wasn't that familiar with his solo stuff, but we chatted, and then we both went to Prague. And we watched the gambling scene. I think the first part of the card game with Le Chiffre, and it was all on a set in a studio, and Mads Mikkelsen was playing cards with the crew outside while he was waiting for the setup, and everyone was just hanging around making a Bond movie. But anyway, so we watched that scene, and we were watching how Martin was working as well. Like Martin's energy is a big part of it. And then we went into the cutting room and we watched some sequences and had a chat about it. And I my thing with it was I said to Chris, he said that I wanted it to be. I had the title. I wanted to call it "You Know My Name," because when he says the name's Bond, James Bond, you're waiting that whole film for that to happen. But I love the sort of arrogance of him. Instead of saying the name's Bond, James Bond, if someone says, "Who are you?" he goes, "You know my name. You know who I am. I don't have to explain myself to you." And I thought, like, we haven't had a Bond song that is from that could be him singing it.
Yeah.
And I wanted it to be like a warning to his enemies. It's like, get out of the way if you know what's best for you, because I'm not going to stop. That was the kind of pitch of it. And Chris, the sound, I think, of Daniel's characterization, in a voice is just extraordinary, and a brilliant writer as well. And I had a few ideas, and then Chris had a few ideas. We went to our separate places and came back about a week later, and we stuck these ideas together, and it was like a jigsaw. Everything just fell into place, and all of a sudden the song was there, and then I took it away and tweaked it a bit and did a demo, and that was it. We were off to the races. But that's where all that came from. I think the idea of masculinity, but I love the idea of Bond just telling people to get out of his way.
Yeah.
The whole film felt like that. The whole film, that even to his detriment, he would push people out of the way. He almost does it. He almost does it with Jeffrey Wright. And Jeffrey has to catch him, and stop him, going after the guy with a knife. And Vesper tries to stop him. It's like he's always pushing the people that are trying to help him out of the way, because his eye line, his crosshairs are the Schiffer, and that's it. He's going to get that guy. And that song, for me, is that feeling.
It's amazing to hear the fans describe that song, myself included, where they say it captures the energy of Daniel Craig's James Bond. I mean, truly that just non-stop energy. I remember so many people hearing it from the first time, used to a certain type of James Bond song, and then hearing that, they said, what is this? This is something new and energetic, and I feel like I could probably run through a wall. So well done.
Well, that's where it all came from.
Exactly.
You can, but I said this about everything. You can only write what's in front of you.
Yeah.
There is no point in me writing a song that I think is a good James Bond song that doesn't make sense with the James Bond James Bond film that I'm writing that song for. You know, there's no point. It's then you're in the realm of the the sort of fan song thing. You know, where it's like, this sounds like a James Bond song, doesn't it? And you go like, well, it does, but it doesn't mean anything to the James Bond film that's being made. So you kind of need all that to be able to write something appropriate. I think, you know, something that speaks to the film that's being made and also what it's about.
David, you've been so good with your time today. I've literally one more question, but if I don't ask it, my audience will hang me from the rafters. And
maybe I won't answer it maybe I won't answer it just to see if that's true.
You should, and I'll prove you that it was a bad ending. So you seem like the type of gentleman who gets very excited and happy about different composers' interpretation within Bond in the movies. That you don't get disappointed, for example. But I have to ask a simple question: can we have you back as a James Bond composer?
I suppose you're asking the wrong person. I mean, if someone asked me, then the answer would not very obviously be yes. But I would have to be asked first. And I know, you know, it's a very, very long and convoluted, complex journey to find the composer, you know, to find anyone who works on a Bond film. I mean, obviously, you know, the queue to get to the head of that line to be the person asked is very, very long. And a lot of people want to do it, but so many things have to be right, you know. And I've always said this to Michael and Barbara, that, you know, I never expect to be asked back ever. You know, the fact that I did one was amazing anyway, but the fact they let me do 5 was extraordinary. But, you know, it has to be, you know, the director needs to be happy with who he's got. I don't want to be the guy sitting in a chair next to a director who'd rather have someone else sitting in that chair. That's the most awful feeling in the world. You know, I care too much about the whole process to want to insert myself in something where it's not appropriate. But if it's right, you know, I mean, if everyone's happy, I always would. You know, I mean, I always felt that, you know, Quantum of Solace felt like it was possibly the start of something different that could go somewhere else. And I'd sort of thought quite differently about the way I was doing it by then as well, you know, and I really liked where we were heading. But, you know, obviously next time they make one, it will be with a different Bond, so everything will change. But I'm so happy and lucky to have done the ones that I've done. If anyone asks me back, and I think it's right as well, you know, it's not only do they think it's right, but I would have to think it was the right thing, you know, but I'd love to, because, you know, I'm still a fan, you know, I still watch them, still got all the stuff, still got the toys.
Well, I love the fan aspect. I mean, you really showed it here today.
Still got my kit on. I mean, that was just for this. You know, I don't go around wearing James Bond stuff.
it'd be putting a magnifying glass on you, I'm sure. David, this was an absolute pleasure, and you know, the danger in this is I feel like we could go on for hours, but I do want to be respectful of your time. And listen, maybe hopefully we will be face to face in November. You know, if everything can stay on a good accordance, it is, and we'll have a
fingers crossed. That would be hugely exciting.
That would be great, and
there
maybe
might be some distance between us though, but we'll just have
that's
to
true. 6 feet or more, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
But I'd love to get together with you. You've been so kind today, and we all in the Bond community appreciate everything you do, and maybe even things that you still will do.
Well, fingers crossed. Yeah, I try and do things that I'm happy doing, and if I'm happy doing them, I think the work is better. You know, I mean, I just did this little animated thing, the Tiger Who Came to Tea, which was on at Christmas last year on Channel 4, which I absolutely loved. It was just something I've never done before, an animated film, and it was so joyous and so funny. And you know, I generally don't get asked to do things that are joyous and fun. You know, they're either sort of super spectacular. So it was lovely to be able to do it, and did it like with a live band and a small band. It was so different, but anyway, I sort of go on about that because it was, you know, the last thing that I actually did and recorded, and it was so different for me, and I absolutely loved it. And it made me think, there is still a lot, there's still a lot to be done. There's still a lot of music to write, but yeah, I do another Bond, of course I would.
Good. I love what you just said too about embracing the joyous moments. I always tell my kids, who are no longer kids, they're adults now, that happiness, not money, is the equity of life. That's the
Yeah,
real payment when you're happy.
yeah. Put life first. That was the reason why Peter Gabriel didn't do something with me that we'd been working on for about 3 weeks, and he phoned me up and he said, "I've been thinking about it. I've decided to put life first." And I think that from now on is my philosophy.
I like that.
Because that's
All right.
the only control I've got is what I'm doing today. That's the only control I've got, and so I'm going to choose to do things that I like with people that I like, and stories that I like, and things that I like, and then working all hours God sends for months on end is happiness. It's like it's not a oh my God, I can't believe I've got to go in and see that guy. Everyone's terrified of people and all that stuff. It's just not worth it. It really isn't. So it's the only thing. I have a morbid thing that I do, which is I think that I think at the start of the day, what if this is the last day that I'm alive, right? So at the end of the day, do I want to be on my deathbed thinking, why was I spending my last day on this earth doing that with that person or with that production or whatever it was, work-wise, how you spend your day, and I'm thinking like, well, one day that will be true. One day it will be the last day I'm alive, and I don't want it to be a disappointment. So I kind of try and do something from the first thing in the morning, try and do stuff that I wouldn't regret if this was the last time I was on the planet, even if it was something simple. The simplest things, usually the best, and tiny things, but stuff that would make me happy, that I'd be happy thinking, what, if today, if the only thing I did today was hacksaw through a piece of plexiglass to stick a shelf in a fridge, and I was happy doing it, that's not a bad way to go. If it was, singing at the Albert Hall, same deal. I just try and do things that make me happy, and I think that's not just a me thing. I think that's put life first. Definitely worth thinking about.
That is incredible sage advice we're going to end on. And by the way, that's advice that's so much bigger than Bond. So thank you for doing that. I appreciate it. Dave, thanks for your time today. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.